Lake Monroe was created out of the Salt Creek Valley in the early 1960s. Thousands were displaced and two small towns razed to make room for the reservoir. But an internet search led one listener to ask what else is at the bottom of Lake Monroe. Pat Bean reports.
Google Lake Monroe and you'll get links to the expected tourist, boat rental, realty properties, and Department of Natural Resources sites. But if you dig down a bit, you can also find a link to something called Site 81. That's what Elizabeth Lynch did.
One of the questions on there was, what is Site 81 under Lake Monroe? So I started doing my Google searches and couldn't find a solid answer.
And that led Lynch to ask, just what is Site 81, and is it really under Lake Monroe? According to an extensive dossier on the SCP Foundation website, Site 81 was created in 1946 as a secret government super site to house and research anomalous activity in the Midwest, and Lake Monroe was built in 1964 by the Army Corps of Engineers as a cover story. At first glance, and second and third glance, it's an eye-opener. The Site 81 page has geolocation maps, images, video, and numerous documents pertaining to the site, and looks the part of a secret government research facility. But that's the point, and part of the fun.
It was very easy, especially early on, to miss kind of the red flags about, well, this is fiction. They would just read down the list and they'd be like, oh my God, there's stuff going on out there.
That's Ben Sisson, or DJ Cactus as he goes by on the site, and he's the author of the Site 81 file. He grew up in Plainfield and began attending Indiana University in 2012. That's where he discovered the SCP Foundation community on Wikipedia. The SCP stands for Secure, Contain, and Protect, and the Foundation oversees the various secret sites scattered around the world.
Go check out the SCP Wiki. Go in with an open mind. There's a lot to get into there. You can really get lost. I mean, there are probably 100,000 pages on that website now, if not more, written by all kinds of different people from all kinds of different backgrounds.
Sisson came up with the idea for locating Site 81 at Lake Monroe during his numerous trips between Bloomington and Bedford for work. He often took the causeway route across the lake, so the wastewater treatment plant at the lake became an obvious choice for the headquarters of a secret government agency. The real buildings were relabeled, and 7 subterranean wings under the lake were envisioned.
Who goes to a water treatment plant except the people who work there? And so you would never think about the people going in and out of it, even if they were bringing in big trucks full of, relics and deific entities and all sorts of stuff.
And the history of the lake was the perfect cover story.
It wasn't always a lake, it's a reservoir. So at some point it had to have been dug out. Why not just build a building under there first and then, flood it?
Sisson now lives in Atlanta, but much of his writing is set in his home state of Indiana, setting his stories in places around Bloomington and French Lick, where he would visit his grandparents, and his hometown of Plainfield adds realism to the fiction and confusion.
Somebody came into the chat one time there on the site and said, hey, I know where this place is. I'm going to go check it out. And I had to be very clear, like, hey, there's nothing there. Take my word for it. The people who live there are lovely. They probably would not love it if you just showed up unannounced.
So what's really under Lake Monroe? Much of the almost 11,000 acres the lake sits on were farmlands in what was known as the Salt Creek Valley. But more than 300 homes, 3 schools, 10 churches, 8 cemeteries, and the county's last 3 covered bridges were either relocated or razed. In all, nearly 3,500 people were displaced, and the towns of Paintown and Elkinsville leveled for the building of the reservoir. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Pat Bean.
Construction on the lake began in 1960 and was completed in 1965 at a cost of $16.5 million. Lake Monroe remains the primary water source for Bloomington.